They cut her off, erased her name from the family will, called her a failure, right to her face. But 4 years later, she walked into their black tie gala, not as the forgotten daughter, but as the CEO of the company that owned the venue. This isn't just a story of revenge, it's a story of silence, of building something no one believed in, until it was too big to ignore. If you've ever felt underestimated, judged, or shut out by your own family, then stay with me, because this is the story of Samantha Reed. Pause, slightly lower tone. The woman they once pitied, and now fear, they called it a family meeting. But I knew what it really was, a carefully staged intervention, one where I was the problem to be fixed. I sat in my father's living room, surrounded by people who shared my last name but not my life. The air smelled of coffee, lemon-scented furniture polish, and tension. Aunts, uncles, cousins, all there, and not one of them looked happy to see me. My father cleared his throat, signaling the opening remarks of this impromptu trial. "Samantha," he said, his voice calm but cutting, "you're 31 now, no husband, no stable career, still leaning on your mother's support like you're a teenager." He said it like it was a fact on a spreadsheet, not something that might hurt, not something that deserved nuance, just data. I glanced around the room. Nobody looked surprised. In fact, most looked relieved, like someone had finally said out loud what they'd all been thinking. Then my aunt chimed in. "We just want what's best for you, sweetie, but you've got to take control of your life." The irony of that made my teeth clench. Take control? They had no idea how much I already had. But I didn't say that. I didn't defend myself. Didn't explain the late nights, the freelance projects, the meals skipped to pay for software licenses. I didn't mention that I hadn't taken a single dollar from my mother in almost 5 years, and that, in fact, I'd been paying her mortgage. None of that would have mattered to them, because to them, I wasn't successful until I was visible, until I fit their version of what success should look like. A husband, a 9 to 5, a mortgage, 2 kids, and a backyard barbecue. My father leaned forward, elbows on his knees, voice steady. "We've talked about it. We've decided the family fund won't be covering your rent anymore. You need to figure things out, Samantha." A pause. Not long, but just enough for me to feel the weight of what came next. I nodded once, slowly. "You're right," I said, looking him in the eye. "It's time." There was a beat of silence, and then a collective exhale. They thought I'd finally accepted their judgment, that I was broken, humbled, ready to conform. But I wasn't broken, and I certainly wasn't done. I stood up, adjusted my jacket, and walked toward the door. Behind me, their voices picked up again, soft chatter, probably already shifting focus to dinner plans or vacation gossip. They had no idea what I was building, and that was exactly how I wanted it. 4 years ago, I disappeared. I stopped showing up at family dinners. I left the group chats on silent. I stopped posting anything on Instagram. No birthday updates, no selfies, no career milestones, nothing. To them, silence meant failure. To me, silence was survival. No one asked why I vanished. They just assumed I gave up. They whispered, "Poor Samantha. She was always too sensitive. She couldn't handle real life. Probably living in her mom's basement." But the truth? I was working. I was building something they couldn't even imagine. It started with a single freelance coding job. A friend of a friend needed a website. They paid me $1,500. It wasn't much, but it was mine. That project led to another, and then another. Soon, I was working around the clock. Nights, weekends, holidays. I barely slept. My laptop had a cracked screen, held together with a strip of packing tape. I couldn't afford to replace it. I skipped meals to buy better software. I learned to fix bugs at 3 a.m. using YouTube tutorials. I took Zoom calls from my closet to block out the sound of traffic. While they were taking ski trips and tagging friends in brunch photos, I was eating ramen on the floor of a tiny apartment, writing code with blistered fingers and swollen eyes. It wasn't glamorous. There were no filters, no clapping, no congratulations, just me, and my stubborn belief that I could build something real, even if nobody was watching. The hardest part wasn't the hunger or the exhaustion, it was the loneliness. The nights when I'd scroll past old photos of happier times and wonder if I was crazy for chasing something invisible. But every time I thought about quitting, I remembered what they said about me. She never finishes anything. She's too soft for the real world. And somehow that gave me fuel. I wasn't just building a career, I was building proof. Proof that I didn't need their approval. Proof that I could disappear and come back stronger than ever. So I kept my head down. I kept working. One day, one client, one line of code at a time. While they thought I was hiding from the world, I was actually creating my own. They say success is loud. Mine wasn't. There were no ribbon cuttings, no big announcements, no LinkedIn brag posts with hashtag blessed and halal hustle. While everyone else was busy curating their highlight reels, I was just working. It started small, a couple of consistent clients, then a small team of freelancers. I didn't even realize I had a company until I looked up one day and found myself managing payroll, client contracts, and hiring timelines. I named it Reed Logic Solutions, quietly, no party, no champagne, just a Google Doc and a nervous click on Register Business. I didn't tell my family, not because I was hiding, but because I didn't owe them that anymore. They made it clear I wasn't someone to be proud of. So while they were posting photos from wine tastings and baby showers, I was onboarding clients from Singapore, Berlin, and San Diego. While they laughed at sitcoms after dinner, I was learning how to write scopes of work and navigate tax filings across borders. I went from a cracked laptop in a studio apartment to an office suite in downtown Seattle, floor-to-ceiling windows, ergonomic chairs, fresh espresso. We hired our 5th employee, then our 10th. By the time I hit 30, I had 32 people working under my brand across 4 time zones. And still, not a word to my family. They thought I was coasting. I was actually scaling. I remember the moment it hit me that I had built something real. One of our clients, a major logistics company, sent a Christmas basket to my office. Not my home, my office. The label read, "To Samantha Reed, founder and CEO, Reed Logic Solutions, thank you for saving our launch." I stared at that label longer than I care to admit. Not because I needed their validation, but because for the first time, I had mine. You'd think I'd feel triumphant. But truth is, I felt tired. Not just from work, but from years of being underestimated. They had no idea. They didn't know I'd negotiated 3 six-figure contracts that quarter. They didn't know I was building an app that would soon be acquired by a federal program. They didn't know my assistant was coordinating 5 international meetings a week. They didn't ask, and I didn't offer. It came on a Tuesday, a simple email, no subject line, just a sender. David Whitman, family attorney. I almost deleted it. I thought it was a follow-up from some old insurance file or paperwork I'd forgotten. But something made me click. The words on the screen made my hands go cold. Samantha, based on recent updates, it appears your exclusion from the Reed Family Trust may violate the original inheritance agreement set forth by your grandmother. I read it again, and again. Then I called David. He spoke like he was walking on eggshells. According to our records, your father claimed you verbally declined your 25% share of everything. Everything. The lake house, the stock portfolio, the family business stake. I didn't decline anything. I was never even asked. I stared at the wall for a full minute, not moving, not breathing. Then something in me snapped, not out of rage, but out of resolve. This wasn't about money, it was about erasure. They hadn't just cut me out of their lives, they'd tried to erase me from the legacy, as if I didn't exist, as if I'd never mattered. I called my lawyer. Within 24 hours, we filed a formal claim. The news leaked within a week. Outcast daughter fights back. Samantha Reed challenges 9.7 family estate. Silicon Valley CEO claims fraud in high-profile inheritance battle. Suddenly, my phone wouldn't stop buzzing. Messages poured in. Dad, let's talk. Don't let outsiders destroy what we've built. Aunt Karen. Sweetheart, I think there's been a misunderstanding. Cousin Ashley. I had no idea, Sam. Can we meet? Of course they wanted to talk. Now that it was public. Now that I was making noise. But where were they when I was sleeping on a mattress in a one-room apartment, building code through tears? Where were they when they thought I was nothing? They didn't check on me when they thought I had failed. And now they were tripping over themselves when they realized I hadn't. It was almost funny, if it hadn't hurt so much. But I wasn't doing this for revenge. I was doing it for the girl who sat at the family table and quietly took every blow. For the woman who refused to shrink just to be accepted. For every version of me they overlooked, this wasn't revenge. This was reclamation, and I was just getting started. Because I wasn't building a story to impress them, I was building a life that didn't need their permission. And when the time came, they'd find out. But not from me. The invitation came in a thick ivory envelope, embossed, formal, Reed Family Annual Gala. I hadn't been invited in 6 years, not since the last time I showed up in a thrifted dress and walked home alone. But this time I didn't need directions. The gala was being held at one of the venues my company had just acquired for a logistics conference. The irony was delicious. I chose my dress carefully, the same midnight blue gown I wore when I signed our first seven-figure government contract. Not flashy, not showy, just powerful. I arrived alone, no entourage, no announcement, just the quiet weight of presence. As I walked in, I felt the air shift. Conversations paused mid-sentence. Forks hovered over plates. My name didn't have to be spoken. It echoed in their eyes. There were no hugs, no warm welcomes, just stares, like they were seeing a ghost or a threat. My father approached first, always the showman, even when sweating through his collar. "Samantha, you look successful." I met his eyes, calm, and legally prepared. I handed him the folder. Inside, official documents outlining my inheritance claim, court dates, exhibits, sworn testimony. He didn't open it. He didn't have to. He knew. Right on cue, Kayla, my assistant, stepped forward, iPad in hand. "Boss, your 2 p.m. with the governor's tech board has been confirmed. Car is waiting outside." The word boss wasn't accidental. It was intentional, and loud enough for the room to hear. I didn't stay for the speeches or the toasts. I didn't need to. I had already delivered mine, without saying a word. As I walked toward the exit, I felt the stares at my back. The weight of every assumption they ever had, shattering quietly behind me. They used to call me the disappointment, the burden, the dropout. Tonight they called me nothing. Because what can you say to someone who no longer needs your permission? Outside, the car door opened. Kayla smiled. Well, that was subtle. I laughed for the first time that night. Subtle enough. We drove off in silence, but not the kind I used to dread. This silence wasn't rejection. It was power. And for the first time in years, I wasn't walking away from them. They were watching me leave. The messages started pouring in the next morning. First came one from my dad. "I may have misjudged you. Let's talk." Then Ashley. "I'm sorry. Truly, I didn't know." A few more trickled in. Cousins, uncles, even Aunt Karen, all suddenly remembering how to spell my name. But I didn't reply. Not out of anger, not out of pride. I just didn't need to. Because by then, I wasn't chasing their approval anymore. I wasn't trying to explain myself to people who never cared to understand me in the first place. I had already walked past them. And some doors don't need to be reopened, not even for closure. That afternoon, I stood backstage at a tech leadership summit in Los Angeles. 300 people in the audience, a dozen CEOs in the front row, the same ones who once ignored my emails, now waiting to hear me speak. Funny how tables turn when you build your own. The host read my name, Samantha Reed, founder and CEO of Reed Logic Solutions. Applause, lights, silence. I stepped forward, took a deep breath, and looked out across the room. For a second, I thought of the old family table, the long lectures, the eye rolls, the years of silence. Then I began. For a long time, they thought I had failed. They mistook my silence for weakness. But I wasn't disappearing. I was building. I was growing in the dark, where it was quiet enough to hear my own voice. I paused, letting the words land. They called me soft. I turned that softness into empathy and built a company with it. They called me lost. I turned that into innovation. They called me too quiet. And now, they're all listening. The room held still. And in that moment, I realized this wasn't the end of the story. It was the beginning of a new one. One where I wasn't the family's shadow or shame. I was proof. That the underestimated don't stay small forever. That the quiet ones are often the ones building foundations while others are busy talking. I didn't come here to be the revenge. I came here to be the answer. Sometimes, the best response is not shouting back. It's building something so powerful that your silence becomes louder than their noise. Samantha didn't seek revenge. She didn't need approval, applause, or permission. What she needed, and what she gave herself, was space to grow. And maybe that's what we all need, to stop explaining ourselves to people who never tried to understand, to let go of the need to be seen, until we're ready to be seen on our own terms. So if you've ever been doubted, called too soft, too late, or too small, remember this: you're not behind. You're just in the part of your story where the world isn't watching yet. But they will. And when they do, make sure you've built something worth watching. If this story spoke to you, don't forget to like, share, and hit subscribe for more real-life stories that remind you you're not alone and you're not done. Your silence might just be your beginning.